The dog barked first. Wyatt Calder set down his coffee cup and listened. Out past the porch, past the frozen water trough, something moved through the snow. He reached for his coat before he reached for his rifle. 23 years on this land had taught him which sounds meant trouble and which ones didn't. This one he couldn't place. He stepped outside into air so cold it burned. The sky over the Montana ridge had gone the color of ash. Snow fell sideways, driven by a wind that had been building since noon. Footprints, small ones, cutting a crooked line from the tree line toward his fence. He followed them with his eyes before he followed them with his boots. A child stood at the gate. She wasn't dressed for this kind of cold. A thin coat, unzipped. No hat. Her boots didn't match, one brown, one black, both too big. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, shaking, staring at the house like she wasn't sure it was real. "Hey there," Wyatt called out, keeping his voice low, the way he might with a spooked horse. "You lost?" She didn't answer, just watched him. He came closer, slow, hands visible. Up close, he could see her lips had gone pale. Her eyes were dark brown, wide, and old in a way that didn't belong on a face that young. Maybe 6, maybe 7. "Where's your folks?" he asked. Nothing, just the wind, and her breath coming out in short white clouds. Wyatt crouched down to her level, knees cracking in the cold. "Well," he said, "you're not going to last long out here. Come inside. Get warm. We'll figure out the rest after." She looked past him, toward the house, then back at the tree line behind her, like she was deciding something. Finally, she nodded. Wyatt Calder's ranch sat 11 miles from the nearest town, a place called Larkspur Hollow that most maps didn't bother naming. He bought the land 19 years ago with his wife, back when the porch light meant something more than habit. Back when there were 2 coffee cups in the morning instead of 1. He didn't think about that much anymore. He'd trained himself not to. Inside, he set the girl by the wood stove and wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders. She took it without a word, pulling it tight, watching the fire like she'd never seen one before. "You hungry?" Wyatt asked. A small nod. He heated the leftover stew from the night before, set the bowl in front of her, and stepped back like she was something wild that might bolt if he moved too fast. She ate slowly, both hands wrapped around the spoon, eyes flicking to him every few bites. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Can you tell me where you came from?" Her spoon stopped moving. She stared at the bowl. Wyatt let it go. He'd learned that from the horses, too. Some things couldn't be pulled. They had to come on their own. He checked the window. The snow had thickened into a wall of white, the kind that swallowed roads and buried fence posts. No truck was getting down that mountain tonight, and no truck was getting up it either. "Looks like you're stuck here till morning," he said, mostly to himself. The girl looked up at him. For the first time, something in her face shifted. Not quite a smile, but close to relief. He gave her his daughter's old room. He hadn't meant to. His feet just carried him there out of habit, the way they always did when he needed a spare bed, before his mind caught up and reminded him whose room it used to be. He stood in the doorway a moment too long. The girl noticed. She looked at the faded horse wallpaper, the small empty bookshelf, the window seat nobody had sat in for 6 years. "Someone used to live here," she said. Her voice was quiet, hoarse from the cold, but it was the first thing she'd said all night. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "A long time ago. Where'd they go?" He didn't answer that one either. "Some doors, once you opened them, you couldn't get shut again." "Get some sleep," he said instead, setting an extra blanket at the foot of the bed. "We'll sort things out come morning." She climbed under the covers, small in a bed that had once fit someone just her size. Wyatt lingered by the door, hand on the frame. "Good night," he said. "Good night," she whispered back. He turned off the hallway light and stood there a moment in the dark, listening to a house that, for the first time in years, held the sound of someone else breathing. Morning came white and silent. Wyatt woke before dawn, same as always, and found the girl already awake, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, sorting through a small tin box she must have carried in her coat pocket. She snapped it shut when she saw him. "Sleep all right?" he asked. She nodded, tucking the tin into her lap. "He made eggs. Didn't ask about the box. Some things you let a person keep." Outside, the storm had left 2 feet of new snow, drifts piled high against the barn. The road down the mountain was gone, buried under a white sheet that stretched for miles. His truck wouldn't move until the county plow came through, and out here, that could take days. He called the sheriff's office anyway, the line crackling with static. "Calder residence," the dispatcher answered. "That you, Wyatt?" "Got a situation," he said. "Found a kid out by my gate last night. 6, maybe 7 years old. No coat worth mentioning. Won't say her name." A pause. Papers shuffling. "No missing kid reports out this way. Not since the Hendersons' boy back in October. And he turned up at his cousin's." "She didn't walk in from nowhere," Wyatt said, glancing toward the kitchen where the girl sat picking at her eggs, listening without looking like she was listening. "Roads closed till Thursday at least," the dispatcher said. "Storm took out 2 miles of guardrail past Miller's Pass. Best I can do is put a note out, see if anyone's asking around. You mind holding on to her till the road clears?" Wyatt looked at the girl again. She'd stopped eating, watching him with that same old-eyed stare from the night before, waiting to hear what he'd say. "No," he said slowly. "I don't mind." He hung up the phone. "They're going to ask around," he told her. "Find out where you belong." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so soft he almost missed it, "I don't want them to find where I belong." Wyatt frowned. "Why's that?" She looked down at her eggs, pushing them around the plate. "Because then I'd have to go back. 3 days passed like that." Wyatt taught her to feed the chickens, showed her how to break ice off the water trough with the flat side of an axe. She followed him everywhere, quiet as a shadow, watching how he did things before she tried them herself. She still hadn't told him her name. He'd stopped asking and started calling her Kid, which she seemed to accept. On the 3rd evening, he found her in the barn, sitting on an overturned bucket beside his old mare, Dinah, stroking the horse's nose with a gentleness that surprised him. "She likes you," Wyatt said, leaning against the stall door. "Animals don't lie," the girl said. He almost smiled at that. "No, I suppose they don't." She kept stroking Dinah's nose, not looking at him. "Neither do you," she said. "You don't lie. Try not to make a habit of it. Then answer me something true." Wyatt straightened. Something in her voice had changed, steadier now, like she'd been building up to this for days. "All right," he said. "Ask." The girl finally turned to look at him, her dark eyes catching the last of the lantern light. "That room I'm sleeping in," she said. "It was your little girl's, wasn't it?" Wyatt felt the question land somewhere under his ribs, a place he'd kept locked for 6 long years. "Yeah," he managed. "It was... what happened to her?" The barn went silent except for the wind pressing against the boards outside and Dinah's slow, patient breathing. Wyatt opened his mouth to answer. Nothing came out. The girl watched him, waiting, patient in a way no child should have to be. He started, and then behind them at the barn door, something moved. A shadow crossed the gap in the wood, boots crunching in fresh snow, a figure standing just beyond the lantern light, watching them both. The girl went rigid beside him. "Kid," Wyatt said quietly, not taking his eyes off the door. "You know who that is?" She didn't answer. She'd already grabbed his sleeve, holding on tight, staring at the shape in the doorway like she'd been waiting for it to find her all along. The figure in the doorway didn't move. Wyatt set a hand on the girl's shoulder, steady, and stepped forward, putting himself between her and the dark. "Who's there?" he called out. Show yourself. For a long moment, only the wind answered. Then boots shifted, and a man stepped into the lantern light, hands raised at his sides, palms open. He was younger than Wyatt, maybe 30, unshaven, wearing a canvas jacket too thin for the weather, a duffel bag slung across one shoulder. His eyes went straight to the girl. "Sadie," he said. His voice cracked on the word. "Thank God." The girl, Sadie, Wyatt thought, turning the name over, the first true thing he'd learned about her in 3 days, pressed herself harder against his side. "You know him?" Wyatt asked her quietly. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her whole body had answered for her. The man took a step closer. "Sadie, honey, it's me. It's Dad." Wyatt felt the girl's grip tighten on his sleeve like a fist closing around a rope. "That's far enough," Wyatt said, and something in his voice made the man stop where he stood. Wyatt brought him inside, more out of a rancher's instinct not to let a man freeze on his porch than out of trust. He sat him at the kitchen table, poured him coffee he didn't ask for, and kept Sadie behind him the whole time, her small hand fisted in the back of his shirt. "Name's Russ Doyle," the man said, wrapping both hands around the mug without drinking from it. "She's my daughter. We got separated 3 nights back, up near Miller's Pass. Truck slid off the road in the storm. I've been searching every farmhouse between here and the county line. Sheriff's office didn't have any report of a missing child," Wyatt said. Russ's jaw worked. "I didn't call it in. Man loses his daughter in a blizzard and doesn't call the sheriff? It's complicated. Try me." Russ looked past Wyatt, towards Sadie, who hadn't moved from her spot, half hidden behind the rancher's frame. "Sadie, baby, come here. Let's go home." Sadie didn't move. "She hasn't said 10 words to me in 3 days," Wyatt said slowly, "and she said even fewer about you. Man wants to walk out of here with a child. I'm gonna need more than a name and a sob story." Something flickered across Russ's face. Frustration, maybe, or something closer to shame. "She's my kid. I don't need your permission." Storm still got the road buried past Miller's Pass. Wyatt said, calm as still water, "You're not walking anywhere tonight. Neither is she. So we've got time, and I intend to use it finding out the truth." Russ took the couch, under protest, and Wyatt stayed up long after the fire burned low, sitting in the old rocking chair across the room, watching him sleep or pretend to. He didn't trust the stillness in the man. Something about the way Russ's eyes had moved when he talked, quick and darting, never quite landing. Near midnight, a small shape appeared in the hallway. Sadie, wrapped in her blanket, crept to the rocking chair and climbed up beside him without asking, curling into the space against his ribs like she'd done it 100 times before. Wyatt sat frozen for a moment, unsure what a man was supposed to do with that kind of trust. He settled the blanket higher around her shoulders. "He's not lying," she whispered, so quiet he almost missed it. "He is my dad." "Okay," Wyatt said carefully. "But that doesn't mean I want to go with him." Wyatt looked down at her. In the dying firelight, her face looked older than it should, the same look she'd worn at the gate 3 nights ago. "Why not?" he asked. Sadie was quiet for a long time, long enough that Wyatt thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, "Because when he drinks, he forgets I'm there. And when he remembers, he's sorry. And then he forgets again." The words landed heavy in the small, dark room. "Your mama," Wyatt started. "Gone," Sadie said simply, before I could remember her. Wyatt looked at the sleeping shape on his couch and felt something old and tired stir in his chest. Not quite anger, not quite grief, but some cousin of both. "I ran when the truck slid off the road," Sadie said. "He was yelling. I got scared. I just ran, and I didn't stop till I found your fence. You walked 11 miles in a blizzard. I didn't want to be found," she said. "Not by him. Not yet. Morning brought an uneasy truce. Russ was sober, apologetic, careful with his words in a way that struck Wyatt as practiced. He thanked Wyatt for taking care of Sadie. He talked about getting back on his feet, about a job waiting for him 2 towns over, about how things would be different this time. Wyatt had heard men talk that way before. He'd said some of those words himself once in a different life, about a different kind of failing. Storm supposed to break by Thursday, Wyatt said, watching Russ from across the porch. Plow clear the pass by then. Appreciate you letting us stay till then, Russ said. Wasn't really a choice, Wyatt said. Nobody's driving anywhere in that. Russ nodded, looking out at the white fields, and for a moment something honest crossed his face. Tired, scared, a man who knew exactly how thin the ice under him had gotten. She talked to you? Russ asked. About us? Wyatt didn't answer right away. She talked. Russ's shoulders dropped. I know what she probably said. Do you? I've made mistakes, Russ said, voice low. Bad ones. I know I don't deserve a clean slate just 'cause I showed up asking for one. But she's all I've got left, and I'm all she's got. That's just the truth of it, ugly as it is. Wyatt looked out at Dinah in the paddock, pawing through the snow for old grass, patient the way animals were patient, waiting for the world to give them what they needed. Family's a complicated word, Wyatt said quietly. Don't always mean safe. Russ looked at him sharp. You got kids? The question hit like a fence post to the chest. Wyatt didn't answer. By the second afternoon, Sadie had warmed enough to let Russ sit beside her by the fire, though she kept her tin box close, and she kept glancing at Wyatt like she was checking he was still there. Wyatt used the excuse of chores to give them space, splitting wood long after he had enough to last the week, watching through the frosted window as father and daughter sat in careful, uncertain silence. That evening, doing dishes, Sadie appeared at his elbow, drying a plate with a towel 2 sizes too big for her hands. You never answered, she said. Wyatt kept his eyes on the sink. Answered what? About your little girl. What happened to her? His hands stilled in the soapy water. She's not asking because she wants to hurt you, Sadie added, with the strange, unsettling wisdom of a child who'd grown up faster than she should have. I'm asking because I think you're the only person who's ever been honest with me. And I want to know what happened to somebody you love that much. Wyatt set the plate down, dried his hands slow, buying time he didn't have. Her name was Emma, he said finally, the name feeling strange and sharp in his mouth after so many years of silence. She was 7, same as you, near enough. Sadie waited, still as the falling snow outside. There was an accident, Wyatt said, on the road down past Miller's Pass. Same stretch you and your daddy went off of. Sadie's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. My wife was driving her into town for her birthday. Wyatt continued, each word costing him something. I was supposed to go with them. Stayed back instead. Fence needed mending. He stopped, swallowed. Storm came in fast. Same as the one that brought you. Did they? Sadie started. My wife lived, Wyatt said quietly. Left 8 months later. Couldn't stay in a house that quiet. Couldn't stay married to a man who blamed himself for staying behind to fix a fence. The kitchen had gone very still. Emma didn't, he finished. Sadie set down the plate and the towel, and before Wyatt understood what was happening, she'd wrapped both arms around his waist, holding on the way she'd held his sleeve in the barn, desperate, certain, like letting go might cost something irreplaceable. Wyatt stood frozen for a moment. Then, slowly, his hand came to rest on the back of her head. Neither of them said anything else. That night, long after Sadie had gone to bed, Wyatt sat on the porch despite the cold, needing air, needing distance from a house suddenly too full of ghosts and questions both. The door creaked behind him. Russ stepped out, 2 mugs of coffee in hand, offering one to Wyatt without a word. Wyatt took it, mostly to be polite. She told me what you told her, Russ said, settling onto the porch rail. About your daughter. Wyatt didn't answer. I'm sorry, Russ said. For your loss. And I'm sorry I asked you that question yesterday. Didn't know. Wasn't your fault. They sat in silence for a while, breath fogging in the cold, the ranch stretching white and quiet in every direction. She's never opened up to anybody like that, Russ said eventually. Not to her teachers. Not to her grandmother. Before she passed. Not even to me most days. He turned the mug in his hands. 3 days, and she trusts you more than she's trusted anybody in her whole life. She's a good kid, Wyatt said. Smarter than she should have to be. I know I've failed her, Russ said, voice rough. I know it. I see it every time she flinches when I raise my voice, even when I'm not angry. I see it in the way she packs that stupid tin box every time we move, like she's always ready to run. Wyatt looked over at him. What's in the box? Russ's jaw tightened. Her mother's wedding ring. A photograph. That's all she's got left of her. Wyatt thought of Sadie sitting on the kitchen floor that first morning, snapping the tin shut the moment she saw him watching. Thursday, Russ said. Road clears, and I take her, and we go back to the life I've made a mess of. Unless. He stopped himself. Unless what? Wyatt asked. Russ looked at him, something raw and desperate crossing his face. Unless you tell me I shouldn't. Unless somebody with a level head looks at me and tells me the truth, because God knows I can't see it myself anymore. Wyatt studied the man beside him, the exhaustion carved into his face, the guilt sitting heavy on his shoulders, the fear of a father who knew, deep down, that he was failing the one thing he couldn't afford to fail. That's not a decision I get to make, Wyatt said quietly. Then whose is it? Before Wyatt could answer, the porch door creaked open again. Sadie stood in the doorway, wrapped in her blanket, eyes moving between the two men with a seriousness that stole the breath from both of them. Mine, she said. It's mine. Neither man spoke. I heard you talking, she said, stepping onto the porch, the cold air catching in her small, fierce voice. About Thursday. About what happens when the road clears. She looked at her father, then at Wyatt, then back at her father. I know what I want, she said, but I don't think either of you are going to like the answer. Nobody moved. The wind had died down enough that Wyatt could hear the fire crackling through the window behind them, could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the small, steady breathing of a 7-year-old girl about to say something neither man was ready for. Sadie, Russ said carefully, let's talk about this inside. It's cold. I don't want to go back to Millbrook, Sadie said, ignoring him, her eyes fixed on her father. I don't want to go back to the apartment with the broken heater. I don't want to lie awake wondering if you're going to come home. And if you do, which version of you it's going to be. Russ flinched like he'd been struck. I love you, Sadie said, and her voice cracked on the word, the fierce steadiness finally giving way to something younger, something scared. I do, but loving you doesn't make me feel safe. And I'm so tired of being scared. Russ set his mug down on the porch rail, hands trembling, and for a moment Wyatt thought the man might argue, might defend himself, might do what desperate men do when the truth gets too heavy to hold. Instead, he sank down onto the porch step, put his face in his hands, and wept. Sadie watched him, not moving, not softening, holding the hard-won stillness of a child who had cried those same tears too many times herself and had none left to spare on comforting someone else. Wyatt stood back, feeling like a trespasser in a moment too private for him to witness, and yet unable to look away. I don't know how to fix this, Russ said finally, voice muffled, broken. I don't know how to be the dad you need. I've tried. God knows I've tried, and I keep failing, and every time I fail I hate myself a little more, and the hating makes it worse. And he stopped, wiped his face with the back of his hand, looked up at his daughter like a drowning man looking for shore. I don't want you to be scared of me. I'm not scared of you, Sadie said quietly. I'm scared of losing you. Those aren't the same thing. Russ let out a broken sound, half laugh, half sob. You're 7 years old. You shouldn't know the difference. I had to learn fast, Sadie said. Nobody taught me easy. They talked long into the night, the kind of talking that doesn't happen all at once, that comes in pieces, stumbling and painful, punctuated by long silences and longer looks. Wyatt gave them the porch, retreating to the kitchen window, watching the shapes of father and daughter through the frosted glass. Close but not touching, two people learning the true shape of each other for the first time. Near midnight, Russ came inside alone, Sadie having gone to sit with Dinah in the barn, needing the quiet company of an animal that never asked more of her than she had to give. She wants to stay, Russ said, standing in the kitchen doorway, hollowed out and steady in a way he hadn't been before. Just for a while, till I get myself right. She asked if you'd let her. Wyatt felt something shift in his chest, an old door creaking open on hinges gone stiff with disuse. That's a lot to ask a stranger, Wyatt said. She doesn't think you're a stranger, Russ said. Neither do I, anymore. Wyatt looked past him, out toward the barn, where lantern light glowed faint through the gaps in the wood. I checked myself into a program 2 towns over, Russ continued. 90 days. I should have done it years ago. I keep telling myself there wasn't time. But the truth is I was scared of what I'd find out about myself if I stopped long enough to look. He met Wyatt's eyes. I don't want her in that apartment alone while I do it. I don't want her with strangers in some system that'll lose her file and forget her name. I want her somewhere safe, somewhere she already trusts. 90 days is a long time, Wyatt said. I know what I'm asking. Wyatt thought of Emma's room, the horse wallpaper, the window seat nobody had sat in for 6 years, now holding the warmth of somebody new. He thought of 3 days that had cracked something open in him he'd bricked over long ago, grief turning, slowly, into something that almost felt like purpose again. I'll need the sheriff's office involved, Wyatt said. You're right. Paperwork. A caseworker checking in. I'm not doing this in the shadows. Whatever you need, Russ said, relief and grief tangled together on his face. I just need her safe. She will be, Wyatt said, and for the first time in 6 years, he meant a promise like that all the way down. Thursday came, and the plow finally broke through, clearing the road down past Miller's Pass in a long gray ribbon through the white. Near midnight, Russ came inside alone, Sadie having gone to sit with Dinah in the barn, needing the quiet company of an animal that never asked more of her than she had to give. She wants to stay, Russ said, standing in the kitchen doorway, hollowed out and steady in a way he hadn't been before. Just for a while, till I get myself right. She asked if you'd let her. Wyatt felt something shift in his chest, an old door creaking open on hinges gone stiff with disuse. That's a lot to ask a stranger, Wyatt said. She doesn't think you're a stranger, Russ said. Neither do I, anymore. Wyatt looked past him, out toward the barn, where lantern light glowed faint through the gaps in the wood. I checked myself into a program 2 towns over, Russ continued. 90 days. I should have done it years ago. I keep telling myself there wasn't time. But the truth is I was scared of what I'd find out about myself if I stopped long enough to look. He met Wyatt's eyes. I don't want her in that apartment alone while I do it. I don't want her with strangers in some system that'll lose her file and forget her name. I want her somewhere safe, somewhere she already trusts. 90 days is a long time, Wyatt said. I know what I'm asking. Wyatt thought of Emma's room, the horse wallpaper, the window seat nobody had sat in for 6 years, now holding the warmth of somebody new. He thought of 3 days that had cracked something open in him he'd bricked over long ago, grief turning, slowly, into something that almost felt like purpose again. I'll need the sheriff's office involved, Wyatt said. You're right. Paperwork. A caseworker checking in. I'm not doing this in the shadows. Whatever you need, Russ said, relief and grief tangled together on his face. I just need her safe. She will be, Wyatt said, and for the first time in 6 years, he meant a promise like that all the way down. Thursday came, and the plow finally broke through, clearing the road down past Miller's Pass in a long gray ribbon through the white. He never asked what she said. Some things belonged only to the person saying them. Russ called every Sunday, just as promised. His voice grew steadier with each week, the program doing slow, careful work on whatever had been broken in him. Sadie would sit by the phone for an hour before each call, tin box in her lap, waiting. On the 89th day, Wyatt drove her into town to meet the bus. Russ stepped off thinner, clear-eyed, a new steadiness in the way he carried himself. He knelt the moment his boots hit the ground, and Sadie ran into his arms without hesitation, without fear, the way a child runs when she finally, truly, believes someone will catch her. Wyatt stood back, watching, a familiar ache rising in his chest. Not grief this time, but something close enough to be its cousin. They stayed one more week at the ranch before Russ found work in a small house 2 towns over, close enough for Sundays, close enough that goodbye didn't have to feel final. On their last morning, Sadie found Wyatt in the barn, brushing down Dinah in the pale, early light. "I'm going to miss this place," she said. "You can come back anytime," Wyatt said. "Doors always open." She wrapped her arms around his waist one more time, the way she had that first cold night by the sink, desperate and certain all at once. "You never got to finish telling me about Emma," she said quietly. Wyatt set down the brush. "What do you want to know?" "Just one thing," Sadie said. "Do you think she'd be glad? That I got to stay in her room? That I got to feel safe there?" Wyatt looked out through the barn doors, past the paddock, toward the house standing pale gold in the morning light, smoke curling gentle from the chimney. "Yeah," he said, voice thick. "I think she would." That evening, after the car had pulled away and the dust had settled on the empty road, Wyatt walked back into the house alone. He passed Emma's old room, the door left open the way Sadie always left it, sunlight falling soft across the horse wallpaper. The small bookshelf no longer empty, filled now with a handful of books Sadie had left behind, promising she'd finish them next visit. On the windowsill sat the tin box. She'd left it there on purpose. He understood that the moment he saw it, understood it the way he understood the language of small, unspoken gestures better than he understood most words. "I'll be back for this," it said, without saying anything at all. Wyatt stood in the doorway a long moment, watching the last of the evening light move slow across the floor, warming a room that had waited 6 long years to be warm again. Then he left the door open, same as it had been all week, and walked out onto the porch, where 2 rocking chairs sat side by side in the fading gold light. One worn smooth from years of use, the other new, small, still waiting for a girl who'd promised she would return.